Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to another Preseason 9 League of Legends Champion Guide. Today I'll be covering Karthus, the Death Singer.
Release your mortal coil.
Karthus is a really strong champion in this meta because he's got some amazing scaling and he can be played in pretty much any lane in League of Legends. He's also a really strong team fighter as well because even if he gets dropped at the beginning of a team fight, he'll still be able to cast spells for 7 seconds. This is a champion that can sometimes be rewarded for inting into the enemy team as well, because if they are trying to do a Baron and you're the only one up, you can go die by the Baron pit and do a lot of damage to the enemy team. He's then got some really good wave clear as well with his AoE damage and a really strong ultimate. It is of course global and it will damage everybody on the enemy team, so with your high scaling, it has the potential to do a ton of damage. Although he is really strong in the moment, he of course still has his cons. He is a really strong champion in the mid and late game, but that of course comes at the cost of a really weak early game. You'll pretty much just want to safely farm throughout the lane phase until you start scaling. This is very important to do on Karthus because you also have a very high full build cost. All of your items are fairly costly, and that of course means you need to farm efficiently to grab them. You are a fairly mana hungry champion as well, especially when you have your E activated and you have some very low mobility. You'll therefore have to position very carefully, but sometimes you may just want to run into the middle of a team fight and die anyways to deal damage with your passive. Then finally, Karthus is also very skill shot reliant. The majority of your damage will come from your Q ability, so if you're not landing it, you're not going to be dishing out too much sustained damage. For your rune setup, you want to go for domination and precision, grabbing Dark Harvest as your keystone. This is a really solid keystone on Karthus, and part of the reason he is so strong in this meta because when you damage a low health champion, it will inflict extra damage. This synergizes really well with your kit because you will be trying to execute people with your ultimate, and this will just add some additional damage. I then like to go for Taste of Blood so I heal whenever I damage an enemy champion, and then I pick up Eyeball Collection so whenever I get a unique takedown, I get some additional ability power. Then finish it up by getting Ultimate Hunter so you can reduce the cooldown on your ultimate. As for the precision side, I like to go for Presence of Mind to reduce the cooldown on your ultimate yet again, and then Last Stand to deal some additional damage when you are on low health. Since you technically have no health when you are in your passive after death, it will increase your damage by a ton. Now as for my additional runes, I like to pick up Adaptive Force twice, and then I go for Scaling Health as my last option. This is the best setup on Karthus because you will increase your damage as much as possible and also get a little bit of Scaling Health. If for some reason you weren't a fan of Dark Harvest, or if they ended up nerfing it even more, you may want to go for Summon Airy instead, but usually Dark Harvest will be the best keystone. For my summoner spells, first of course I pick up Flash. Karthus is a very immobile and squishy champion, and you can use this throughout the game to save your life over and over again if you end up getting caught in bad positions. Of course, you can always flash offensively as well into the middle of a team fight, die, and then start doing damage with your passive. As for my second summoner spell, I'll pretty much always take Exhaust. This is to greatly reduce the damage an enemy deals to you while also slowing them to make your Q easier to land. You could of course go for something like Heal or Teleport as well, but usually you will get a lot more from Exhaust. Now let's look at your abilities, starting with your passive, Death Defied. So upon taking fatal damage, Karthus remains active for 7 seconds, rendering himself unable to move, attack, or use actives or passives, but becoming untargetable and invulnerable for that duration. He will then be able to use his abilities at no cost. If Defile has been learned, it will remain toggled on Death Defied's entire duration at no mana cost. This passive has the potential to be insanely strong because even if you get dropped at the beginning of a team fight, you'll still be able to cast your spells for 7 seconds. That means if you do die in the middle of a team fight, you'll still be able to do a lot of damage to the enemy team. You'll want to start by dropping your wall and then spamming your Qs, and if you do want to ultimate during that passive, you have to be very careful because it is a 3-second channel and your passive only lasts 7 seconds. If you're at a point in the game where you don't have a lot of cooldown reduction, you may only be able to spam a couple Qs before you have to ult. Next, let's look at that Q ability, Lay Waste. When activated, after a 0.5 second delay, Karthus detonates the target area in the cursor's direction, dealing magic damage to all enemies within, doubled when hitting only one target. This here is Karthus' main source of damage because it is very spammable and it does some really nice AoE damage. It is great at AoE wave clearing, but it's even better when hitting only one target because like it says, the damage is doubled. Therefore, while you are farming, you'll also want to try to poke the enemy champion whenever you can, and try to hit only them whenever possible so they get that increased damage. When you're going for an all-in, make sure you combo your walling ability with this as well because they will be slowed, making it a lot easier to land. When you're trying to land it against more mobile champions, it can sometimes be a pain in the ass because it does have a 0.5 second delay. Next, let's look at your W, Wall of Pain. When activated, Karthus creates a wall at the target location for 5 seconds and grants sight around it. For the duration, all units who cross it are both slowed for 4 seconds, reduced by 50% over the first second, decaying over its duration, and lose 15% magic resistance for that same duration. So this here is a pretty strong part of Karthus' kit as well, because it does provide a really nice slow, which makes landing your Q a lot easier like previously mentioned. It gets even stronger than that though, because the enemy will lose 15% of their magic resistance for 4 seconds when they strike the wall as well. It's great offensively when you're trying to chase down a target so you can land your Qs, and it's also great as an escape as well because it is a really strong slow and you can escape to safety. Now let's look at your E, Defile. When toggled off, Karthus restores mana whenever he kills a unit, and when toggled on, Karthus deals magic damage per second to all nearby units. So this is a really nice ability in both situations because when toggled off it will really help with your mana sustain because you will be using your Q rather often to help last hit minions during the lane phase. Then of course that AoE damage is also great for clearing up minion waves and adding additional damage in team fights. You do have to be very careful when you do toggle this ability on however, because the mana cost is actually pretty ridiculous. You'll want to toggle it on just to clear minion waves really quickly or to just add additional damage in a trade, then toggle it off right away. It is really nice during your passive however, because this will remain toggled on no matter what, it doesn't have a mana cost. Now finally we've got your ultimate, Requiem. When activated, Karthus channels for 3 seconds and deals magic damage to all enemy champions upon its completion. Karthus cannot move or cancel Requiem after activation until the channel either ends or is interrupted. The last part there you'll have to be very careful of because if you're channeling it in front of somebody with crowd control, they'll surely crowd control you to cancel the ultimate and it will go on full cooldown. Regardless of that though, this is still one of the best ultimates in the entire game and it can do an insane amount of damage to the enemy team, especially when Karthus is on full build. You'll have to pay a lot of attention to the enemy's health pool, level 6 and beyond, because it's a great way to finish off kills even across the map. Like I said, it will do a lot of damage and this gets even higher when you combine it with Dark Harvest. For your skill order, you'll first want to put a point into your ultimate whenever you can at 6, 11, and 16. You'll then want to focus on maxing your Q ability as quickly as possible because this is your main source of damage and it's great at clearing up minion waves throughout the lane phase and poking the enemy champion. You'll then want to focus on maxing your E ability second because it's also some really solid damage and the mana sustained also scales. That of course means you need to save your W ability for last, but you want to take an early point in the ability at level 3 so you can use it as a way to slow the enemy to either engage or escape. Karthus isn't a champion that's known for having a bunch of combos, but what you'll pretty much want to do is drop your Wall of Pain under the enemy champion and then activate your E and start spamming out your Qs. That's basically all you have to do when dishing out damage on Karthus, but if the enemy does try to flash away from you or there is multiple low enemies, you can always channel your ultimate as well to execute them. Keep in mind however, if there is champions nearby with crowd control, they'll probably try to stop you. During the lane phase, farming is the first thing that's really important. You'll want to focus on getting as many last hits as possible with your lay waste. It's really strong at clearing up minion waves and last hitting them. Your item build is rather expensive, so you need all the gold that you can get. The second thing that's important about the lane phase is trading. You'll want to be poking the enemy throughout the lane phase with your lay waste while you're also farming. Drop your Wall of Pain on the enemy to slow them and reduce their magic resistance while you spam that lay waste to increase the chances of it hitting and increase its damage. You can always toggle on your Defile as well to increase that damage, but keep in mind it's very mana costly, so you have to be careful when using the ability. Teamfighting on Karthus either requires you to poke from a distance with your lay waste or jump into the middle of a team fight with your Defile activated. Karthus is a unique champion because even if he dies, he can spam his spells for 7 seconds because of his passive Death Defied. You'll want to make sure you drop your Wall of Pain in the middle of a team fight for its really strong slow and magic resistance reduction. You'll also want to be on the lookout for low enemies to finish off with your ultimate, but make sure it doesn't get cancelled. If you do it in front of somebody with crowd control, it'll surely get stopped. Now I'm going to cover some of your harder matchups, and first up is Annie. Annie's a really tough matchup because when she has a couple items in her ultimate, she has the ability to 100 to 0 you. Therefore, you'll have to be very careful whenever you know Annie has her ultimate available, especially if she has her flash, because Annies like to flash on top of you and delete you. Play more passively and poke safely whenever you can with lay waste. Next here we have another really strong champion in this meta, Kassadin. He scales insanely well just like you. He's not as good of a team fighter, but he can assassinate targets rather easily. Since you are very squishy and immobile, he'll just be able to stack his ultimate and then jump on top of you and just delete you instantly. He is usually even weaker than you in the early game however, so try to punish him and don't go anywhere by yourself in the late game because he'll follow you around and kill you. For the next hard matchup, I've got Veigar. He's also a pretty damn hard matchup for you because he has the potential to one-shot you, and if he is able to get you in his stun, you're pretty much just screwed. You'll have to play very passively against a Vhagar and just focus on farming, wait until the later stages of the game where you are a stronger team fighter, and don't get caught in his stun. And last but not least, I've got Vel'Koz. Vel'Koz is a very frustrating champion to go against because his range is a hell of a lot longer than yours, and you can't really get into a range where you can poke him, he'll just be poking you throughout the lane. Therefore, just try to play passively, farm whatever you can, and try to dodge his skill shots as much as you can. As long as you get your farm, you'll definitely outscale a Vel'Koz, so just play safely and play for late. Alright, with that covered, let's look at the item build, which starts with a Doran's Ring, 2 health potions, and a Warding Totem. The Doran's Ring's a really nice starter item because you get a really nice health pool, some additional ability power, and some nice mana regeneration. If you were feeling really confident, you could go for a Dark Seal instead and try to get that stacking and eventually get a Magi's, but usually you'll be much safer going for the Doran's Ring. For your core items, I like to go for a Luden's Echo, Morellonomicon, and a Rabadon's Deathcap. You can of course go for an Archangel's Staff and a Rod of Ages as well. I will be talking about that in the item pool, but usually this will be the core items that I go for. The Luden's Echo is a really nice item because you get a big chunk of ability power, a really nice mana pool, and also some cooldown reduction. Pretty much everything you need on Karthus, but you'll also get a really nice passive that deals additional damage when you are at 100 stacks. This will just make Karthus a little burstier than he already was whenever it is available. You'll then want to pick up the Morellonomicon because this gives you ability power and health, but also magic penetration and also applies grievous wounds to the enemy for 3 seconds. It's a really solid item and I'll pick it up second no matter what first item I go for. Then, since you are trying to do as much damage as possible with your ultimate, you'll want to get a Rabadon's Deathcap third to get as much ability power as possible. In between these core items, of course you will want to pick up your boots, and you can get Sorcerer's Shoes if you want a bit of magic penetration, Ninja Tabbies against high AD teams, and Ionian Boots of Lucidity if you want 10% cooldown reduction. Since magic penetration scales so well on Karthus, I'll pretty much always go for Sorcerer's Shoes, but if I feel like I need some additional survivability, then perhaps I'll go for Ninja Tabby. So in that item pool, like I previously mentioned, you can get either an Archangel's Staff or a Rod of Ages, which would be your first buy, not something you get later. Both of these items would make Karthus a little bit tankier than usual, but now in this meta, you pretty much want to get as much damage as possible on Karthus and use it with your Dark Harvest, so I skip both of these items pretty much all the time. Both of these items are viable, however, but Karthus will take a bit more time to come online, which is another main reason I don't like to pick them up. An item I do pick up pretty much all the time, however, is a Void Staff. This gives you a really nice chunk of magic penetration, which allows you to get through some magic resist in the later stages of the game, so you can do as much damage as possible. If you're looking for a more defensive option, you can get something like a Zhonya's Hourglass. It's a really solid item on Karthus because you will be able to go into stasis for some extra survivability, and it also gives you ability power and cooldown reduction. If you're then looking to apply a slow and you want a bit of a higher health pool, you could always go for Rylai's Crystal Scepter. If you're somebody that struggles at landing your Qs on Karthus, then you may want to consider a Rylai's because of the slow, but I pretty much skip this item all of the time because there's much better grabs in the item pool. For my example fill build though, I like to go for Luden's Echo, then I choose my boots, get a Morellonomicon, Rabadon's Deathcap, Void Staff, and a Zhonya's. This is a really strong full build on Karthus because you'll have an insane amount of ability power, you'll be very bursty, and you'll also apply grievous wounds and have a defensive option from the Zhonya's as well. When you acquire this full build, you'll almost be able to one-shot squishy targets, so Karthus becomes an absolute monster in the late game. And that's all I've got for Karthus in Pre-Season 9. If you guys enjoyed the video, please make sure you like and subscribe, and visit the video description below. I have a link to all my social medias, and I do also have a Discord server and a second channel that I upload daily to now, so those are some you should definitely check out. But other than that, thank you guys so much for checking out the video, I really do appreciate it, so take it easy, have a good day, and peace.